Hello, I'm Becky and I'm Head of Talent and Skills at Manchester Digital. Manchester Digital are the trade body for the digital and tech sector. I'm joined by a brilliant panel of people here today, and we're going to be talking about digital skills across the UK and specifically here in Greater Manchester. So before we get started, I'm going to jump over to the panel and ask them all to introduce themselves. So Andy, do you want to start?
Hi, yeah, I'm Andy Lovatt. I'm the CEO of Digital Advantage. We're a creative and digital skills training company. We work predominantly with schools and colleges, but we also have a line of development in neurodiverse talent coming through SEND schools.
Amazing, thank you. Kelsey.
Hi, my name's Kelsey. I'm the Technical Skills Coordinator at IN4.0 Group. IN4.0 Group is a industry for technical and digital skills training company based in Salford.
Thank you. And last but not least, Amul.
Apologies, lost the mute button there for a second. Hi, I'm Amul Batra. I'm the Chief Partnerships Officer at Northcoders. Northcoders is a primarily coding bootcamp. We've trained 800 people over the last 5 years to become software developers and placed it around 250 northern companies. We deliver apprenticeship programs as well.
Thank you. So as I said, we're going to be looking at digital skills. I want to jump into some research that's been done. And it shows that 17 million people across the UK are without essential digital skills that we need for life and work. So why are digital skills important in our current world? And what would be your number one thing that needs to be done to tackle the digital skills crisis? Andy, should we come to you?
Start with the easy ones then, shall we? Yeah, that's such a big question, and I'm not surprised that your research shows that there's a skills deficit there. Why they're so important, I think now, probably 5-10 years ago, people would talk about the digital sector and the tech sector, how important it was there, and even then there were skills shortages. I think now virtually every company, every organisation in the country has a digital element to it. The economy has become predominantly a digital economy, and I think if you want to work in that economy, then you need digital skills. I think whether you're a tire fitter, a mechanic, or a window cleaner, you're coming into contact with digital skills as part of your everyday work, whether it's through a booking system, an app, or your marketing. I think it's just all encompassing now. And I think, whether you're working in digital skills or living in that environment, then, the whole country really needs an upgrade in their digital capabilities, whether it's for online safety for young people, and whether it's just kind of general work life skills for perhaps older people who have not grown up as kind of digital natives. So right the way through from primary school to pension age, you need those digital skills. There isn't a silver bullet for that. I think you need different interventions for all of those different groups. But one thing I think you do need is sustained investment. I think one thing that we're not very good at as a country or as a city is sustained incremental investment in stuff that works. And we've been working in stuff now long enough to know what works and what doesn't. So it would be really good to see some investment program that goes beyond like 12 months, maybe even like 3 years, or go crazy and do a 5-year program. I think only when you do that can you get really sustained improvements in investment and growth.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy. Kelsey, I'm going to come to you next because obviously your role as a technical skills coordinator, what do you think needs to be done to tackle the skills crisis?
Yeah, it's a very big question, and like Andy said, I don't think there is a single kind of silver bullet to answer that. But one thing that we have really seen at IN4 is widening the access and participation for young people. particularly people who are maybe career changers or maybe don't have that traditional background in technology. I think it's very easy for people to take somebody who maybe has a STEM degree, maybe has, you know, that higher level education in a computing related discipline, to then kind of take on those digital skills. But I think other people tend to get left behind, and there's many different non-traditional pathways into engineering or even just the digital technologies workspace. And I think it's really important that we are making sure that everybody can access that education, not just those who maybe already have a degree or maybe, you know, already within a role, but also those who maybe have come from a background where they maybe haven't had the opportunity to be in education post 16. They possibly have had something happen in their past, whether that be you know, a conviction, or they've had other issues where they've had to drop out of school, or have not had, you know, the standard opportunities that maybe everyone else has had. And by giving those people those skills and that support to kind of upskill themselves, really, and it does come from investment and prolonged periods of investment, as Andy said as well. But I think that is where we've really seen that difference starting to be made, is by allowing people that opportunity that they might not have otherwise had.
Absolutely. I think it's a really nice point that you're both making, that it's such a wide audience and people from different backgrounds, and there's a sustained investment that's needed for that. So I'm going to come to you, Amul, as obviously leading with Northcoders, and you're training hundreds and hundreds of people in your organisation. What do you think? What's your take on this? What do you think needs to be done?
So it's interesting the 17 million figure you use, because I'm presuming that covers up not kind of digital skills that are required to be digital experts, but actually probably people who might, you know, not have the literacy to really be able to use computers and actually kind of get by in the day-to-day world, because that's a huge number. Yeah. And I think you've got to look at that number and tackle it in very different ways. And I know there's stuff that Manchester Adult Education Service does with its community learning teams, and just trying to get that basic level of digital literacy up. In terms of you know, the points that Andy and Kelsey and I guess, you know, what we have made and what we do at Northcoders is getting people who don't have any kind of background in technology and actually turning them into kind of technical experts, really. And that's what, you know, we've been doing for 5 years. And there are some really easy wins to go at. And, you know, over the years that I've been involved, over the last 5 years that I've been involved in kind of the Manchester digital sector, and kind of, you know, liaising with Manchester Digital, and, you know, being part of your reports over those years and watching the numbers change. The big easy one is obviously getting that inclusion right. Both Andy and Kelsey made that point, but, you know, that women in technical roles, for example, sort of fluctuating between 17 and 19% over the last 5 years that I've been reading your reports. It's not enough, right? And if you're not trying to attract 50% of the population into those technical roles, then you're missing out. So, you know, at Northcoders, we don't just talk about inclusion being a gender thing, it's an everything thing. So we talk about age diversity. We talk about, you know, not just attracting young people into technology, but actually, you know, those career changes, those people that might, you know, age 40 or age 50 go, actually, you know, the tech scene looks like something I want to be involved in. I really like the idea of problem solving. The fact that I'm old shouldn't stop me. It should actually think, well, I've got a wealth of experience behind me, and maybe I will prove myself useful as a newly trained digital expert. Obviously, we talk about, you know, the BAME community being well represented. Typically, as Kelsey mentioned, a lot of people might imagine software developers coming out of computer science degrees, and you know, generally in the past, it's been a very white, male, middle class kind of pastime. And we need to do as much as we can to kind of break down that barrier to attract people from different ethnicities. You know, representing the LGBTQ plus community is really important. And I think, you know, the brilliant work that Andy does with representing the SEND community and neurodiversities, and making sure that actually we look at people who have those kind of backgrounds, actually can actually be digital superstars rather than people that were kind of struggling to get into this sector. And the work that, say, for example, Auto Trader have done in becoming the first autistic awareness. I can't remember the exact title, but they've got an accreditation that makes them like an autism awareness partner. For Andy, do you remember the exact title? Sorry,
I don't remember the exact title. No, but they're kind of autism-aware employer, and they've got a gold standard of that, and they really do go out their way to increase their neurodiversity coming into their workforce.
I think they were the first employer to ever be accredited with that standard.
Absolutely.
But, and that means making sure their workplace is geared up for people who kind of have a background in autism. It makes sure that the people know how to do meetings, low-level lightings, all of those kinds of things are kind of verified and checked. And so, if we are bringing people from such vast different backgrounds and turning them into technologists quickly, then that's a very easy win to start chipping away at that number of those digital experts that we need.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing would probably help us all that we haven't really mentioned is schools. Again, Amul and I have been long enough to be having this conversation year after year. It almost seems decade after decade as well. But if digital could become a core skill at school, English, maths, science, the arts, and digital, then all our work would be made much easier. Because unless that changes, we're still going to be having this conversation in 5 years' time, and we're still going to be playing catch up, and we're not going to have that natural flood of talent coming out of our schools that see the jobs in the digital economy as a natural place to be.
Absolutely. I think a really good point around that is doing the work within schools, because we've got to remember that the young people in schools aren't necessarily surrounded by parents and family and environments where digital and tech is part of their language or part of their job. And we've got young people growing up with technology, using smartphones, using apps, creating websites for fun. And we've got to really capitalize on that and kind of show them the potential for future careers as well.
Absolutely.
So this brings me on to my next point. So if we think about Greater Manchester specifically, and how we address that immediate digital skills shortage, but also supporting employers to diversify their workforce, it'd be good to hear kind of what you're doing as an organisation to support this ambition. I'll come back to you, Amul.
So, I mean, everything that Northcoders does is with diversity and inclusion at the heart, and it goes back from day one. The first ever cohort we had in April 2016 had 10 people on it. 4 of them were women, and they were all at that stage, even though we were a startup with very little startup capital, they were all given fully funded course places on that first course, and we've had that commitment to diversity since then. And we do a lot of work with groups like Code and Stuff and Innovate Her, and trying to represent different angles with trying to attract different people to code. And we've been keeping anonymous data about the people that have been through our boot camp since November 2019, and we're 29% women or non-gender, let me get that right. 29% women and minority genders. We're 21% BAME. We're 15% LGBTQ plus represented. Our average age is 30, so the people we taught are between the ages of 18 and I think 56. 5% identify as having a disability, and 25% have not been to university. So we're collecting this data, but hopefully that's a reflection in the work that we're trying to do to attract as many different types of people into coding and into doing our courses. But to put this another way, we've had people who have had backgrounds in law, accounts, finance, engineering, recruitment, sales at one end of the spectrum, and then we've had people do our course who have been on job seekers allowance, who have been returning to work, mums who might have not had a career before, people who have been working in shops or driving Ubers or delivering food on bikes, or people who have come from the creative industry, loads of musicians, loads of people from a design background. We've had a farmer do our course who's a data engineer at a Manchester company called Wejo. We've had the station announcer at Piccadilly Station do our course and is now a software engineer at an insurance company. You name it, we've helped kind of change their careers and bring these people who weren't people with backgrounds in technology into the industry. And we've had quite a number of people who have been on the spectrum who have done the course as well, and we've helped change their lives in terms of what they thought was achievable to what is achievable. And those are things that I'm personally very proud of.
That's incredible. It's incredible to hear the stories of the different backgrounds coming through, because it really makes it real, doesn't it, that the industry is open to anyone, and anyone from any background can join. Andy, I'll come to you. So kind of the same question around kind of helping to support employers diversify their workforce. Obviously, with the work that you're doing, how are you kind of supporting that ambition?
Okay, well, there's a couple of things. I think the boot camps model that Amul and Northcoders were pioneers of really works. I think that intensive deep dive into that skills development kind of really works, and it, as Amul has demonstrated, works for a lot of people. So I think that is actually been a really good development over the last few years, and I know now government is kind of supporting elements of that approach. Again, we because we work lower down the age range, we're definitely about kind of turning on new talent, especially those that probably wouldn't look at the creative and digital sector, into the job opportunities. So we work with a lot of hard to reach groups. We talked about neurodiverse groups and schools that we work with, but we work with some marginalized groups, both in terms of socioeconomic class, geographical marginalisation. So we work up in Lancaster and Lancashire, and you're out in Morecambe and you start talking to people about digital jobs, and you can realise actually that's the first time they've had that conversation, and that's really good, because they can then be directed to Lancaster and Morecambe College, who have got a whole bunch of courses, and then they can accelerate those people into the workforce and start plugging this thing. Our work does very much depend on a kind of a long-term approach. We're not turning people around in 13 weeks. We're working with people over 1, 2, sometimes 3 years. So again, I think that that call for kind of project-based learning, I think, in education would be a really, really good addition. One of the things that we're really proud of recently, we've worked with the Manchester College to put in place a supported internship. So again, that's creating a bridge really between kind of sixth form and the workplace for young people with autistic spectrum condition. And like any group that's got additional barriers, they need additional support to overcome those barriers to get them ready for the workplace. And we've had the opportunity to work with some really talented people. It's only 15 because it's the first year this year, but it's looks like all of those young people are going to find positive employment outcomes, and they wouldn't have been able to do that without working with us. It's only small numbers, but I think what we've done now is we've proven that it can work, and we've proven that there's talent in there, and there is some amazing talent in that kind of SEND space. I mean, Amul and I have worked in the creative and digital space for a long time, and we've worked with these people either diagnosed or undiagnosed. Incredible talent that just need a little bit of support to change their lives and provide real talent for employers, real loyalty, a real sense of coming at problems differently as well, which I think is really important, and coming up with solutions that are not certainly not off the shelf. So that's kind of feedback again that we're getting from employers there, and I think more and more employers are looking into that space to plug their gaps. But I come back to it. I think the stuff that Amul's doing and others are doing in that space, that the bootcamp model, I think, really works.
Amazing, thank you. And Kelsey, can you tell us about what your organisation are doing?
Yeah, so primarily, obviously, we are all about those Industry 4 skills. So looking at modern digital technologies, whether that be anything from AI all the way up to kind of video games development and visual reality and augmented reality. So we do have a really big range of programs that we run. And some of those programs are those kind of traditional bootcamp style programs that we've spoken about. But one thing that we're really moving to focus on at the moment is working on projects that are already within a business, you know, and bringing businesses into our organization, and not only showing them how to digitally upskill for themselves and people in, you know, the managerial positions, but how they can then bring on perhaps less digitally knowledgeable staff members, whether that's promoting from within their company or recruiting from outside of the company, and allowing them to really teach the skills that they've learned from us and create this sort of more sustainable model of being able to then go on to teach their own staff members. So we've recently launched the GM Foundry, so the Greater Manchester Artificial Intelligence Foundry, which has been a really fantastic program is the word I'm looking for, and it's been fantastic to see our engineers get to go and work with the business and kind of nurture that talent within the business, see the business itself become so much more digitally skilled, and then be able to pass that on to other members of staff within their organisation. And we're now launching the Unity Centre of Excellence, which is to do with video games development, and we're inviting in smaller companies, you know, these companies that are going to be the future of this kind of Greater Manchester tech space in the next couple of years, who will hopefully be very successful and grow and become employers themselves within a couple of years, and really teach them how to seek out that talented, you know, when you want to bring on new staff members that may be really talented but don't necessarily have those hard skills that you would look for in a tech company, of how they can, you know, share those with their new recruits and how they can really upskill from within that business. So that's been something that has been really successful so far. It's really exciting to see, and hopefully it continues to grow. And then obviously we do have the bootcamp model as well, so we really do focus on people from non-traditional backgrounds, like I said already. So our second cohort, I've just written the impact report for, so the figures are kind of on the top of my head, but we had a 40% female or non-binary student body, and 22% of those students were members of the LGBTQ plus community, and we also then had 40% of that cohort were first generation graduates. So we really want to focus on those people who maybe haven't grown up with that you know, tech surrounding, maybe their family aren't digitally literate, they haven't had that exposure, but we can really bring them in and teach them those skills so they can then go back into their communities or go and successfully secure that job with the new digital skills that they have. So that's kind of an overview of what we're doing at the moment.
That's brilliant. There's so much good stuff going on in the industry. It's really good to hear. So I'm going to come on to my final question for you all now, because we want to make sure that we put Greater Manchester on the map as a key place for businesses that are seeking that digitally skilled workforce. How far off this do you think that we are? Kelsey, I'll start with you.
That's a tricky question, actually, because I think working obviously for a tech company, I do feel like we are getting closer to that goal of becoming, you know, this digital city. And I see, particularly, we're based in Media City, so we have an amazing community of creators and digital technology companies, and especially working, you know, next to the BBC and ITV and seeing all of the incredible technological advances they've come up with. It really is great to see. And I think it gets bandied around a little bit that Manchester is now kind of the second to London. We've become this new tech capital of the North, and I can absolutely see that happening, but I think we're not quite there yet at the moment. I do think there is more we can do. I know certain areas of Greater Manchester are in quite a high level of poverty. There's not that access to digital upskilling that there maybe would be in more richer areas of the country. And whilst central Manchester does seem to be really making some good headway with this new digital technology revolution, I think, you know, there's more that we can do for our actual community, and on the grassroots level as well, and supporting, you know, our students, you know, the people who are going to Greater Manchester schools and the families around them, whether that be helping them to use technology, giving them technology that they can then use to improve their education. And, you know, I think whilst we are really making massive strides towards that, I think we still do have a little bit of a way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Amul, I'm going to come to you next. How far do you think we're off this marker?
Well, it's a constantly moving goalpost, I think is the honest answer, because there's no doubt about it. As Kelsey said, we are probably the second most technologically, we've probably got the second best skilled workforce in terms of technology in the country. And I think, you know, that number is probably one of the fastest growing in Europe. I think I read somewhere, I can't remember the exact source of that stat. But the thing is that as more and more companies move to Manchester, and I'm involved a little bit with Midas and often involved in their panels and trying to attract companies inward investment and companies into Manchester, that pool then kind of shrinks because of it. And it's brilliant that these companies are coming to Manchester, but at the same time, we've got to almost turn them around quicker than ever to make sure that not only that junior level talent is there, but they're there at mid and senior level as well. And then when you add on all of the new businesses that are starting that need to be technologically enabled, and every new startup is now a technology company. There's no way that can't be true, as Andy mentioned earlier on in the call. We might be becoming, we might have got close to a number that we needed 3 years ago, but that number required is probably bigger now than ever and will only grow. We've got a state at Northcoders whereby we are graduating people almost not quick enough to having jobs, because we've got more companies looking for roles than we've almost got junior developers that we're graduating, and that's just growing week on week. You know, and it's a brilliant place for the graduates at Northcoders to be in, because they've got a really great choice in terms of the jobs that they can go to right now. But we've just got to keep working faster, and we've actually just got to push more and more numbers through, make sure that they're coming from as many different backgrounds as possible. And, you know, just I'll quickly put in one final point that haven't been mentioned, is another reason why diversity and inclusion is so important, not just because of the to solve the numbers background, is just to make sure the code is written has no unintended biases in it. You know, it's really important that the code that is intended to be used, absolutely intended to be used by everybody, isn't written by a certain section of society. We need to make sure that all of those kind of unintended biases, those unconscious biases, are not reflected in the apps, in the codes, in the things that everyday people need to use. So we're getting closer, we're getting more diverse, but I think we're still only maybe a quarter way up the mountain, and that mountain keeps growing.
Absolutely, it does. It just keeps changing even as new technologies come out and the new skills that need developing. But I really loved what you said there about kind of the reason for diversity, because if we want to build the best products that are being used by everyone, we need to have everyone involved in creating those as well. Andy, I'm going to finish with you on this one. So, you know, we've just talked there about how far advanced we've become to reaching this goal of kind of being a key place for businesses looking for those digital skills. Where do you think we are on that marker?
Well, I mean, I think we're definitely on the map, because Manchester is very good at putting itself on the map, you know, and it's always been good at that. Again, back in the day, probably Manchester was known for music and football. You know, that's what it was known for. I think it's now known for probably less for music, still for football, but tech. I think you could throw tech and fashion in there as well, and I think those two are not disconnected. You know, the explosion of e-commerce, the likes of Boohoo, and I saw it first, and things like that. I don't think it's coincidental that that's happened here. So I think that's good. It adds another layer to the Manchester story. So the likes of Midas, government, GMCA can weave a richer story. I think you've probably got to look at the reasons people make investment decisions. It's skills is up there, but it's not just about skills. And again, I think after 18 months of pandemic, we need to start looking at actually what Manchester offers to the kind of quality of life as well. So again, that's access to housing. It's a good cultural offer. I think perhaps where we've failed and are still failing is the level of education in the city is not as good as it could be. I think, you know, at all national indices, we're kind of bumbling along, really. It would be amazing if we could have this conversation in 5 years' time where Manchester was known as a centre of excellence for education from primary school up to and through university. I think that would be a really good place. And I think that would, you know, that would again attract business leaders who are making those decisions, you know, not just for their reasons, not just for skills availability reasons, but, you know, where are my kids going to grow up? What are the schools like? What kind of offer have they got? And again, if Manchester could pioneer this kind of, you know, a digital skills offer from the age of 5 through to when you leave university, that would be really good. And that would, again, keep the kind of wheel turning on, you know, Manchester as a place of innovation. You know, it's, you know, a place that is not afraid to try things, to do things first, to occasionally fail, but, you know, do so with a certain style and verve that kind of still gets itself noticed. And you kind of, it's almost like that. So if the tech scene had the confidence that the music scene had, you know, 20 years ago, that would be brilliant. I don't think we're far off. I think, like Amul says, I think we're probably always going to be behind the curve in terms of demand for skills and the ability to produce people to meet that demand. But, you know, that's the way it is. So I think, you know, Manchester is here. I think the challenge there is, you know, kind of, how do you stay there? You know, how do you stay at that kind of number 2, pushing number 1? How do you create a sense of difference in its offer, which is, yes, about skills, but it's about so much more than that as well.
You know, I feel Manchester lacks is any kind of sense of collaborative, connected city. And I can't say this from recent travelling exploits, because I haven't been travelling because of what we've been through in the last few months, in the last kind of 18 months. But there are cities that kind of have their digital ecosystem much better connected than we are. And I'm talking about things like, you know, the apps for using the tram or buying tickets on the tram is so unintuitive, right? And it's so not connected to the rest of the things that you might need to be connected to in the city. Like, wouldn't it be amazing to have one app? You don't need a card anymore. You shouldn't be swiping a card that works on the buses and the trams and the trains. And you know what I mean? There's all sorts of stuff that we can do as Greater Manchester or even Manchester City Council, whereby there's only one login required, you know, for all of this stuff. And I just think if the city can make that kind of investment in feeling like we have got like technology that actually works and talks to each other and is interconnected, it will automatically start bringing people up, because it will get easier. It doesn't feel like using tech in this city to get around, to kind of be citizens, is as clear as it can be. As I said, I've not articulated that ever before, so I don't know if it's come across as well as I wanted it to, but hopefully there's a point in there.
I think that's really good. And I don't know if you remember that, you know, when we were visited, I think it was by the Prime Minister or the Foreign Minister of Estonia. So, you know, Estonia is the most connected, integrated country digitally in the world. You know, I mean, again, that's, yeah, why can't we do that as a city? You know, that would be cool.
I sort of think that if we can get to that point, you'll have to excuse my son. He loves pressing the doorbell 5 times when he comes back from school. So if it happens again, it's him. If we can get to that level of investment in our technical infrastructure as a city, then that allows more people to kind of work on those real world problems. Absolutely. And it enables us to work collectively and to feel like we're in a much more technologically grown up place. But while certain things are kind of hard to use and certain things don't work together, it's then hard to feel kind of pride in that. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it is.
I think it, oh, sorry, go on.
No, sorry, you go.
I was going to say, I think it's quite an interesting point. It's something that we kind of discussed So AWS, Amazon Web Services, have a competition called Connected City, and it's all about coming up with ideas of how you would use AWS to create a more connected city. And there's some really interesting entries and really interesting discussions, but I completely agree. We kind of have those tools there to do it, but we almost don't lead by example, I suppose, with the city, and we're trying to get people to join in and learn these digital skills, but then you don't actually get to see them in practice in the everyday. So I think that's a really great point and something really interesting to think about as well.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like the industry has moved at such a pace that everything else is struggling to kind of keep up. So we're now, as we say, like second behind London for digital skills. Yet it feels like kind of everything else around Manchester is still trying to keep up. And to be that digital sort of city as well.
Yeah, I find it really interesting. I think I was talking to someone else about this the other day of we predominantly work in the cloud. We mostly work in AWS, but when I actually started with IN4, I was a cloud engineer. And that job didn't even exist when I was in school, which is crazy to think. I graduated from school in 2015, and this role wasn't even something that you could do. And yet, by the time I'd finished university, that was my graduate job. So it really does go to show how fast the technology is evolving, and how quickly we need to keep producing these engineers and these technicians and digitally skilled workers to keep up with the demand.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point that you make, because I spoke about something similar. Obviously, it's quite a lot longer since I left school, but when I left school, there were no apps, there were no smartphones, and everything that we've had to learn within the industry along the way just to keep up with it is incredible. Now, 20 years feels like, it seems like a long time when you talk about it, but it's really not. And I think that's one of the messages to get out to kind of younger people as well. And I think this is one of the things that we always try and push, is that the skills that are needed are sometimes things that have only become a skill or a need in the last 12 months. So there's an opportunity for anyone from any background, like regardless of age, to come in and learn something at the same time as other people within the industry. So it's not that they're starting and they're necessarily on the back foot. They can start and learn that new technology immediately. And I think it's a really important message to get across to everyone, because I know sometimes it feels like there's these big barriers to enter the industry. And I'm sure it feels quite scary when you hear some of the terminology, some of the acronyms people use, you know, if you look at coding. But once you break that all down and you realise you're coming into it pretty much at the same point as a lot of people, it can break down those barriers and kind of show those opportunities as well.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's interesting when we work with companies now, and I mean, with one of our AWS Academy, so it's an academy we run every 3 months, but as part of that boot camp, the students work with a partner company of ours. So we've had quite a few large companies come in. We've had the likes of, BAE Systems, NGF, we've had Bentley Motors come in. So some pretty big companies who are starting at exactly the same point as our students, and they've come to us, and obviously we do it as a student project with supervision from our consultancy team. But these huge companies who have been, industry dominators for many years are now coming to us and saying, we know nothing about the cloud. We know about as much as your students now. And it's a really interesting collaborative experience of the students who are relatively new, have only maybe been working on cloud technologies for six weeks at most, to then be in the same position as these companies. And yeah, like you say, I think there's something really, I suppose, supportive, collaborative, and really encouraging about knowing that this is a new skill and you're not actually starting behind anyone else. You've not missed the starting gun or anything. You're actually learning as you go, and it's a new thing for everyone. I think that's really important in education.